My dad is furious that my mom slept with other people in an open marriage he wanted. My parents got married when they were super young. My dad knocked up my mom, and their parents married them off. My grandfather was able to set up some business for my dad in a big city, and they moved here soon after my birth. My mom grew up in a conservative southern town where she was taught to be a submissive wife. And even after moving to the big city, she didn't spend much time socializing. She had no friends and never went out. My dad was only there to provide for us. He was always away on business, and he wasn't there as a husband for my mom or as a father to me. My dad made a lot of money, so we never lacked anything. Growing up, I became my mom's best friend. We would talk about everything. I pushed her to make friends and to find hobbies. After years of pushing, she started going to a nearby park and made her first friend, a gym trainer. Encouraged by her friend and me, she decided to join the gym. She met a few more people there and started having some semblance of a social life, but she still continued to tell me everything. I think my dad's new secretary gave him the idea, but he asked my mom for an open marriage almost a year ago. He told her he wasn't happy in their marriage and that she wasn't providing him with everything he wanted. My mom, who is a Christian wife, was mortified and told me about the proposal in tears. I suggested she get a divorce, but she said she didn't believe in it, and she wouldn't be the one to end their marriage. As my dad pushed, I knew exactly where this would end up if my mom agreed. Her friend and I convinced her. My mom was hesitant at first, but she agreed with the condition that they would be completely transparent with each other. My dad was a middle-aged 41 man with a belly, and my mom, 39, was an athletic woman who worked out regularly. I'm a 22-years-old woman, by the way. I don't know how my dad was so blind or what he thought would happen. I helped create online dating profiles for my mom almost 6 months ago. After getting an insane number of matches, choosing from them and chatting with them for months, my mom started hooking up with a few people. Getting all this attention has provided a massive boost to her confidence, and she seems better. My dad hooked up with his secretary almost immediately. He's had very little luck with other ladies. With their transparency thing, my mom tells him about all her hookups. A few weeks ago, my dad screamed at my mom for some minor thing. Usually, my mom would have apologized, but with her new confidence, she didn't back down. It's been constant fights the last few weeks. My dad keeps starting fights by making snide remarks about my mom's clothing or appearance. He almost even called my mom a bitch, but stopped himself. I think open marriage finally sunk in. My mom told me he tried to have a conversation about stopping their open marriage, but she immediately shot it down. I think they'll split up. My dad was never there for either of us, but the thought of my parents splitting up still feels weird. I don't feel bad for my dad, but I wish he put effort into his family. I'm happy for my mom, though. Update. A few days after my previous post, my dad left our home and had a divorce served to mom in a week. My grandparents didn't know about any of this, but my dad told them when he served the divorce. He also implied to them that my mom was cheating on him. Both sets of grandparents came to our home and started berating my mom. I kept screenshots of all my parents' communications, and my mom showed them to them, and it got way worse after that. Grandparents started fighting each other, blaming each other's children for causing all this. A few days after this, my mom's old church friends came to our home. Back when my mom used to go to church, they used to look down on her for being from a small town. My mom has always been a very caring and non-judgmental person, so she disagreed with their bigotry, and they began excluding her from their activities. After she met her gym friends, my mom stopped going to church entirely. These church friends started calling my mom a slut, and she kicked them out. My mom is on a cut right now, so she has very defined abs and arms. So, along with all the normal stuff getting thrown at her, my grandparents accused her of having a man body, and she also had a lot of random transphobia thrown at her. Her trainer friend has been a great support through all this. She contacted the attorney she used for her divorce, and my mom is spending a lot of time at her house. Turns out, the business my dad is running is owned by mom. It was set up by my mom's dad in her name, so it belongs to her. I did not know this until now and assumed that my dad owned it. The whole situation is a huge mess right now. Dad is living in some hotel, and my grandparents left yesterday after a week of fighting and trying to force my parents back together. I know there's a lot more divorce drama to come, but I hope it calms down for now. Number 2, they're not my kids and not my problem. About a month ago, I found out both of my children were the results of my soon-to-be ex-wives' affairs. I've had a feeling for a while now that both them were not mine. 6 years ago, when my son was born, I was the happiest I had been in my entire life. I had married my best friend. We had a child together and everything seemed amazing. That was until he started getting older. After a few years, I started to have doubts that he was actually mine. He did not look like my child. The more he started to grow, the more I realized just how different he looked compared to what I would expect a child of mine to look like. I am not petty or paranoid enough to let that alone drive me. It was my wife that really set my alarms off. Whenever she went out, she never went where she said she did. She would have huge holes in her schedule she could never explain to me. She would refuse to allow me to interact with anyone from her workplace, and a close friend of hers accused her of flirting with her significant other at the time. It did not help that soon after our son was born, her lies started to catch up with her. Still, though I loved her like the fool I was, she told me up and down how much she loved me whenever one of her lies caught up with her. She had convinced me that despite the fact she was a lying and manipulative woman, that she wasn't a lying, manipulative whore. Last year she got pregnant again, and I still held out a small bit of hope that it was mine. But when her daughter was born, it was obvious she was mixed race. I refused to sign the birth certificate, and the paternity test I demanded afterwards proved my suspicions right all along. Neither of them are mine. The day I got those test results were the day I filed for divorce and walked away from the family I'd created. I knew that it would destroy her son's life to see me walk out. Despite my concerns, I was the best dad I could be to him. I loved him with all my heart and put in 110% into being the father he deserved. Now though, when I see him, I'm filled with disgust. Disgust for my wife, disgust with myself for not trusting my instincts, and disgust that the last 6 years on my life have been for nothing. I have been told by multiple people now that I am a monster for leaving my son like this. My ex has tried on multiple occasions since I moved out to use him to guilt me into getting back with her. She will have him call me at random hours of the night, crying and begging for his daddy to come back. The day I moved out, she paraded him into the room as I packed my things to show me how much damage I am doing. In every conversation that he has brought up, both online and off, I'm berated and shamed. That, despite the fact I am not the boy's biological father, I am his dad. What I have sadly now realized is that, to most, my own feelings mean nothing. My parents are my only supporters through all this, with my own siblings calling me a despicable person for abandoning a child like that. My feelings of betrayal and sadness mean nothing, because a child is involved. I know it is not his fault. I know that the man he called his father for his entire life just walked away. But why am I expected to man up? Why should I have to pretend everything is fine, and I do not feel contempt for this entire situation? Why should I put my own life and feelings aside? I never was the boy's father. I loved him like one, and honestly still do. But I would come to hate and contempt him if I had to play that role. Hate myself for not standing up and taking my own life back into my own hands. He's not my child. And even though it is not his fault, he is not my problem anymore. Update. 1. Her son knows the truth of why I left. I sat down and told him that I'm not his father, and that his mother lied to me and cheated on me. I made it clear I am not mad at him, that it is not his fault this is happening, and no matter what I will still think he's an amazing kid. 2. I have a lawyer and I'm not going to be paying child support or alimony.